Number 25. Go ahead, Madam Clerk.
Item number 25, subject, drought update and annual water supply management report.
Thanks. Ms. Dyer, whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of the council. My name's Kelly Dyer. I'm the water supply manager, and I will be giving the monthly drought update and annual water supply management report. So first I'll review the drought status, our demand status, water supply status, our water supply strategy, and then the 2018 annual water supply management report. Rainfall for the water year, we have had about 15 inches at Gibraltar Reservoir, about 11 inches at Kachuma, about 10 inches downtown Santa Barbara. This is all slightly above normal. We've been off to a good start, but I would not characterize this as a wet year yet. We are still in a drought, and so we're hoping for some additional storms to come our way. This is the federal drought monitor, and they have categorized our area as a moderate drought condition, along with the rest of the state, which is categorized as fairly dry. Local conditions can vary, so in our area we're just coming off of the 7 driest consecutive years on record for our region, and the city remains in a drought emergency. This shows the forecast for the next 3 months. They're showing equal chances of above normal, below normal, or normal precipitation. So what that means is anything can happen. We continue to plan for drought conditions. Demand status, we had a 30% reduction in water use for the month of December, and our 12-month running average is 29%, so very close to our target of 30%. Water sales revenue by month, we track this to make sure we're not having any issues with our revenue, since the majority of it comes from volumetric water sales and is dependent on the amount of water used. So we are showing that our revenue is coming in as projected for FY19. Gibraltar Reservoir is currently full. So we did have a spill event that began on January 17th. You can see a picture of the spill happening over to the right. The water is pretty brown. So we've had pretty challenging water quality following large storm events, very high turbidity and organic matter. This is accelerated after fires. We had the Ray fire and then the Thomas fire, which we're still seeing the impacts of those. So we did have to shut down our diversions on January 16th, and this usually lasts for a few weeks to a few months following a storm, but we will resume the diversions as soon as possible with blending of other sources. This last year was a little challenging. We never really did get to divert up to the rates we like to see because the water quality after the Thomas fire. So Kachuma is currently at 36% of capacity. It's about 70,000 acre feet. And we did see some significant inflows coming into Kachuma following the January storms. However, the majority of those inflows were not credited to the Kachuma project. The concept of the Kachuma project was that we would only accrue credit for water that would otherwise have made it to the ocean. So if there's relatively dry conditions and we don't have what's a live stream condition, it goes for downstream water rates. And so that's what happened. It did help with the timing of the barge, the emergency pump facility, but we haven't seen a bump up in terms of our credits to our water supplies. The city's stored Kachuma supplies about 8,400 acre feet. We do have the largest amount of water stored compared with the rest of our Kachuma member units, which does put us at risk for higher evaporative losses. As mentioned earlier, the COM is monitoring lake level projections to determine the timing of the installation of the emergency pump facility. Those projections have now been pushed out where we would need the barge to be operational by summer of 2020, and notice to proceed would have to be given as early as fall of 2019. All of this could change. We'll have to see what happens with the remainder of the rainy season, and also find out more about the downstream water rights and how much they're planning to release this summer. Last year, we were really successful in coordinating with them on the amount of water that was released that allowed us to delay installation of the barge. Imported water, this slide is now outdated. We just had an increase in our 2019 allocation up to 15%, so still relatively low allocation. The city currently had about 300 acre feet of water stored in San Luis Reservoir that was carried over at the end of the calendar year. And all of that water that was at risk of spill in San Luis is being delivered to Lake Cachuma in January, so we do not project that the city will have any risk of losing any water if San Luis Reservoir spills this year. San Luis is very full. It's probably going to spill sometime in February or March. So we are planning to shut down the city's delivery of state water in February and March, and there's various reasons why we are doing this. One of them is that it's a good neighbor policy to reserve some of our water for the ID1 exchange later this year. Our state water pipeline goes right by Santa Ynez, and so when the state water facilities were constructed, we developed an agreement with them where we would send our state water to Santa Ynez ID1, and in exchange, they would give us their Cachuma project water. It saves us money because we don't have to pump our water all the way up to Cachuma, and it also saved them money because they didn't have to build a treatment plant in order to continue to receive their Cachuma deliveries. So if we were to continue pushing our state water at maximum capacity right now with such a low allocation, we would run out by April timeframe, and there would be a gap in the deliveries until we were able to purchase supplemental water. Really, all we're doing is shifting that gap to later in the year to take the water when ID1 is more likely to need it. We're also concerned about our evaporative losses on the city accounts at Cachuma, so we'd like to kind of balance out how much we have stored there to be a little closer with the pack, since we're taking on the most on evaporative losses. And we don't see that there's little to no impact on the emergency pump barge timing, particularly since we had some benefits of the recent rain, but this gap in delivery was going to happen regardless. It just would have happened later in the spring rather than right now. So we are continuing to pursue up to 2,800 acre feet of additional water purchases. That's assuming that dry conditions would continue. And we have an opportunity with Mojave Water Agency. It's the same deal that we did last year, which was actually one of the best deals that we've had throughout the drought. It's $320 per acre foot to purchase the water. It's a 4-to-1 exchange, which means that for every 4 acre feet we receive, we'd have to give 1 acre foot back over the next 10 years. And we'd have to pay $250 an acre foot of that return water. That's for the transportation costs. This purchase would maintain maximum deliveries through the city's share of the pipeline to Cachuma through spring of 2020. And Mojave has agreed to, so we have signed a letter of intent at this point, but it's non-binding, and we can reassess our needs after we find out what happens with the rest of the rainy season. So Mojave is aware that we may be reducing our request, and we'll know more in the next few months. Our current water debt is 3,700 acre feet, and That's without the Mojave Exchange. That would add another 700 acre-feet to our water debt if we pursued that this year. So groundwater, we continue to monitor seawater intrusion and our water levels. We are currently resting our groundwater basins, although we do exercise them regularly in case they need to be brought back online quickly. We also have a couple of rehab projects that we're doing this summer to maximize the production capacity of our wells. It just increases the production rates by doing rehab on them. So we are planning to bring about 4 of our wells online this spring unless we get additional substantial inflows. There is a storm coming this weekend. I think Thursday through Sunday is what I saw, and up to 3 inches. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that we get some good rain. The desal project continues to operate in full production, and staff have been working diligently on the draft term sheet for the water sales agreement with Montecito Water District. That'll be discussed as a separate item today. Our water supply strategy, this is no changes since the last time. This does not incorporate the recent rain that we had, which filled Gibraltar. So I'll go through where we are right now. We're currently in year 8 of the drought. And on the bottom, the purple is our recycled water. The dark blue is our Cachuma water. So this year we're planning on using much of the carryover that we had held on to from last year. The light blue is Gibraltar and Mission Tunnel. The yellow is groundwater. Orange is state water. And green is desal. So there is a projected shortage out in 2021. Again, this does not account for the recent bump in supply at Gibraltar. We'll be coming back this spring with a plan to address this shortage in 2021. The key message I want to get out is that we're still in a drought. Even though we've had quite a bit more rain than we have in previous years, we haven't seen an increase at Cachuma that we would like to. So for 2018 Water Supply Management Report, this is a backwards-looking document, and it summarizes our water supplies used in 2018. It is a EIR requirement for this state water project that we make findings that our groundwater basins are in long-term balance. This is a chart showing our planned water supplies for 2018 versus actual. Generally, it tracked as planned. The main difference is that you can see we planned on using quite a bit of Cachuma water, which we ended up passing through our state water and using that instead. So we have no state water stored at Cachuma at this point, but instead our Cachuma carryover storage has been built up. Our groundwater is conjunctively managed with our other water supplies. It's what's called in lieu recharge. So when we have other supplies such as surface water available, we will rest our basins and let them recover, and we really only pump our basins during droughts and emergencies. This is a map showing our groundwater basins. So we have storage unit 1 here, which we also call our downtown basin. And we have several wells in this basin. Most of them are connected to the Ortega groundwater treatment plant, except for the Alameda well, and a pipeline is currently in design to connect that well to the Ortega groundwater treatment plant as well. Foothill Basin is up here. We have 3 wells in that basin, and then storage unit 3 is located here. We have 1 well in storage unit 3 that's used for non-potable use. So the Foothill Basin, there are several other pumpers in this basin. We just completed a modeling study with the USGS to update the sustainable groundwater yield, and that showed that we would have about 8,000 acre feet available for the city's use over a 10-year drought period. So last year we didn't pump anything from Foothill Basin. That's because we had surface water available, so we were resting the basin. And that remaining yield is about 3,800 acre feet available to the city. Our water levels are near 1992 levels, which was the last major drought. And we have about 60 monitoring wells in our basins that we keep track of. And I've just taken a few, for example, to show. On the bottom here, the red is the city's groundwater pumping, and the green is pumping by others. So this is the last drought in this area, and you can see an increase in city pumping. The water levels declined, and then afterwards we kind of stopped pumping, and that's when the water levels recovered. And then in the 2000s, we were having water quality issues and needed our groundwater wells for blending. This was before the ozone treatment was added to Cater Water Treatment Plant, which has now resolved the issue. So we were pumping for water quality reasons, and then the drought hit. So now our water levels are at or below the 1992 levels. However, there is still yield in the basin, and we've actually have records going back to the 1950s where the water levels are even lower than they are right now. Storage Unit 1, this is 16,000 acre foot yield to the study based on the latest modeling report. And last year we used about 500 acre feet. The city is the only known pumper in the downtown basin. We're not aware of any other large production wells in the downtown area. So we have about 10,500 acre feet remaining from that basin, assuming some level of acceptable seawater intrusion. For us, we've assumed that the 101 is the boundary of acceptable seawater intrusion. Alameda and high school wells are our more inland wells, so pumping those more helps to minimize seawater intrusion impacts. This is a chart showing our groundwater levels. So going back to the last drought, you can see significant pumping. Water levels dropped down, and then they bounced right back up. This basin's confined, meaning it's under pressure, so it's very responsive to pumping. Water levels go down, and then they bounce right back up when we stop pumping. The bigger issue in Storage Unit 1 is seawater intrusion. And so we have several chloride monitoring wells, and I've taken a few. Here's some right at the coast for an example. And you can see after the last drought, we had pretty high chlorides. Then they dropped down, and now they're back up. So we are seeing seawater intrusion right at the coast, which is what we would expect. Now we're about halfway between the 101 and the ocean. This is the last drought. Chloride concentrations, then they dropped off just in time for the current drought, and now we are seeing an uptick in chlorides at that location. At the 101, this is really our boundary of where we would consider acceptable seawater intrusion. Once chlorides hit this location, we'll have to consider shutting down our wells. At this point, we have not seen any chlorides, so we're still fine at that location. As for Storage Unit 3, this is a smaller basin. It has very challenging water quality. We would have to add treatment in order to use it for potable use. There are other pumpers in the basin, and the safe yield available to the city is estimated at 200 acre feet per year. We use it for non-potable use. It's connected to our recycled water system. So last year we used 26 acre feet from that basin. It's really only used when our tertiary recycled water treatment plant is down for repairs or maintenance. So our recommendation is that council approve and adopt the City of Santa Barbara Water Supply Management Report for the 2018 water year, finding that groundwater resources are in long-term balance in accordance with the conjunctive management element of the city's long-term water supply plan.
It's a lot of information. Are there questions from the council? We have a public speaker. Mr. Walker, why don't you come on up? Welcome.
The drought seems to be an ongoing problem. You know, it's amazing. March 20th, 2011, I was at El Estero, and we had some operational problems that morning due to high flows, and the scheduled operator commuted from, I think Buellton, and he just didn't look up to operating that night. So I took the shift as the treatment plant operator. I got 1.25 inches in 35 minutes. It was a very heavy rain, and that was the last time, March 20th, 2011, that Kachuma went over the top and spilled. So it's coming up March 20th on 8 years since his last spilled. So the city and all the agencies in this area have done very well in using their state water, their purchased water. It's a concern. It's a big juggle. And what I saw in this last week of rain, Sycamore Creek right down the street from me, it ran for a couple days, and it's amazing how quick it dried up. It's bone dry again. Same thing with Mission Creek. I can remember, Mission Creek running to the ocean. There was something like 44 inches, 1977-78 water year after the Sycamore fire. It ran into August, and you sure don't see that anymore. So there is a concern about the groundwater basins, but the city of Santa Barbara Water Resources has done an excellent job in doing the juggle. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. So, Ms. Snedden?
I just have a couple questions. Can you go back to slide, I can't read the numbers on here, I think it's 18, it's the one right after water supply strategy. Yeah, this one. So the change in the orange, the state water purchases, that has to do with our allocations?
That's simply based on our demand. So what could happen is the state water is being delivered but being stored at Kachuma. So you wouldn't, even if we're delivering state water at full capacity, it may not be showing up on this chart if we're storing it at Kachuma for use later in the next year. And what could happen is instead we would pass through the state water and not use our Kachuma carryover, and that would show in the next year. So it's primarily related to the balance of storage and demands. This strategy assumes we keep the pipe flowing full through 2020, that we would actually pursue supplemental water purchases. Those would likely, that agreement would likely occur this summer, and that's when we could start pushing the water through.
So this graph shows the actual, how we will be meeting the demand.
Correct.
From which supplies, but we may have stored other water that's in there. I think that's
correct.
Important to emphasize there on that one. And then I had just two questions. One about seawater intrusion. I know in some places it's not reversible depending on what the situation is off the coast. And in our particular basin, it sounds like it's somewhat reversible if you're given enough time to rest the pumping from the groundwater. Is that, to what extent is that reversible?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Snedden, that's a great question. We're going based off of observation from the last drought. And it took about 20 years for it to really fully recede. So it's a very slow process, but if we stop pumping and just allow the natural flow, it is a basin that's under pressure, so there is, the pushing of water out towards the ocean. Okay. So, the other question that has come up is sea level rise, and we'll have to also consider that, I think, in the next round of modeling, how that would affect.
That was my next question. Mm-hmm. And then just one more, that because it's a confined aquifer, it's getting recharged not from rainfall and percolating down so much as coming through basal flow out of the mountains. So we're not really gauging how those recharge based on rainfall. It has a pretty constant rate of recharge, or?
For storage unit 1, the primary recharge area is on Mission Creek between Oak Park and Rocky Nook Park.
So it is
So-
from surface flow? Mm-hmm. Okay,
along the rivers,
okay, thank you.
streams.
Okay, so we have water supply for the next couple of years, but based on solid conservation by our residents and businesses. It's going to rain tomorrow, apparently, so we'll keep our fingers crossed. And we need to, as you recommended, approve the groundwater strategy at this point. Do I have a motion to move the staff recommendation?
Second.
That was Sned and Rouse. Any other discussion? Ms. Sned.
Just always want to emphasize how carefully our water supply is managed and what an excellent job you do in managing this for us and for the city. We're in really good hands with your careful planning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Yes, thank you, staff. And we're going to continue with our water